Welcome to the Authority File. I'm Bill Mickey, your host and the editorial director at Choice. My guest for the next 4 episodes is Stephen Rosato. He's the general manager of OverDrive Professional, the academic and corporate services division of the ebook and distribution platform, which launched back in the spring of 2020. Given OverDrive Professional's perspective on the library market, we'll be discussing trends Stephen has noticed with academic libraries, especially in the last year during COVID. In this first episode, I asked Stephen about some of those trends, particularly what he's seeing in audiobook usage and how that compares to ebook engagement. All right, Stephen, welcome to the program.
Hey, Bill. Thank you for having me. OverDrive Professional is excited to be here with Choice.
Excellent. So let's start with a quick introduction. Tell us about what you do at OverDrive Professional, and can you provide us a brief overview of the professional division and how it fits with OverDrive overall?
Sure. I'm the general manager for OverDrive Professional. We are the business unit that specializes in both academic and corporate accounts. So we work with everyone from the Princetons and Yales and community colleges to the Microsofts, as well as like the Department of Defense and like the U.S. Senate Library and Library of Congress. Relatively new business unit, OverDrive Professional. We've been servicing Microsoft was actually one of our very first corporate accounts back in 2004. But we've been, serving U.S. government and universities since probably 2005, 2006. But over time, OverDrive is split out to public libraries. Has long been our bread and butter. We're in probably 90+% of the public libraries here in the U.S. We've expanded through K through 12. We've also have international business unit, which is obviously focused on international, and just recognizing that as distinct businesses, universities, they're dealing with different content, different lending models, different needs, and the same thing with companies, corporations, nonprofits, and government. So having the people who do the collections development and the type of content that those institutions needed a dedicated focus. So back in September 2019, OverDrive decided to create the additional business unit, and we're a dedicated team working specifically with those institutions and the message we have to them, but also just to provide them with what they need best, which certainly differs from the public library or the K through 12 space.
Yeah, excellent. I wanted to sort of dig in a little bit on those differences. I mean, what is your approach like to the professional and academic market, and how is that different in specific ways from the public division?
Well, I started to touch on it, but it is, having different lending models for what they need. It is different types of content. One of the things that's made us, OverDrive successful, probably more so in the academic market, and we compete probably more directly with like the ProQuests and the EBSCOs of the world. But I always use the example of, you have a tractor trailer and a motorcycle or a sports car. They're all vehicles. They're all motorized things, but they have very different sort of functions. And one of the things that, particularly on the academic side, has made OverDrive particularly successful and valuable to universities and colleges is just the depth of our catalog. We have about 3.4 million titles from 30,000 publishers. Usually look at OverDrive to support curriculum content. We have a lot more of academic and scholarly content than we used to have. Particularly if you go back 5 or 6 years, but having, the Springers and the Taylor and Francis is certainly helpful. The things that we have found it just in the short term, because it really, coming up on 2 years as a distinct business unit, some of the changes we've made to adapt and better serve that market has been like adding class sets. So giving universities the ability to pay a per student cost for a specific title that they could assign to the students. So if it's, English 101 and they're reading To Kill a Mockingbird, they're able to assign that title. It's not part of the general collection, and the students have access to it for, it depends on the publisher. They opt into the different, lending models, but it could be 30, 60, or 90 days, and that way they have the title available that way. On the corporate side, something that we've just recently started, the ability to also assign titles to them, which particularly out on the corporate side, if you have strategic initiatives, whether it's customer service or, diversity, equity, and inclusion, whatever you may have, you want to know that folks are reading some of the content that you're building and putting together for the library. And the ability to assign those titles is something that has been asked for from the get-go, and we should be able to roll that out by the end of Q2, if not early Q3. So something we're excited to do.
Excellent. So you've obviously been paying close attention to how audiobooks are performing, especially in the last year during COVID. Can you tell us about some of those engagement trends and how they compare to ebook performance? What are some of the key metrics that have emerged, and how has the academic market in particular been performing in that regard?
It's been fascinating. I mean, OverDrive pre-COVID, we were seeing really consistent and strong growth, and COVID accelerated that in a lot of different places, particularly on the K through 12 side. But probably for the last 4 or 5 years, we consistently saw audiobooks were getting 25-30% growth. And that was across a variety of metrics, whether it was unit sales or circs or even just, dollar amount. It was this really year-on-year growth. And, you start from a small number, it's hard to sustain year-on-year that, 25-30%. But just seemingly audiobooks, somewhat insatiable growth. And it was across all markets. Coming through COVID, so, I had noticed, in particularly leading up to COVID, I was getting a lot of universities that were particularly interested in OverDrive as an audio provider. It was more about accessibility and providing books in different formats for students. And as soon as COVID hit, obviously things changed. Libraries shut down, budgets were frozen. Those calls really stopped very abruptly, and understandably so. I happened to notice, like earlier this year, probably in January, February, I started to get a few of those calls, not overwhelming amount, but it reminded me like, oh, that was something universities were really interested in. So I started to poke around just to see what the circulation numbers were like. And I was shocked at how much more audiobooks circ in the academic market compared to even the public library market. Now, public library is, much more geared towards leisure reading, books that might lend themselves towards audio, whether it's your James Patterson and so on. And in our public library market, and I end up looking pre-COVID, during COVID, and post-COVID, we actually, the most notable thing during COVID, we saw audiobooks continue to grow at probably about a 10-15% clip, but the ebooks zoomed up. They were up to like the amount of circs was like up 30%. So people just had more time. They were not at gyms. They were not, commuting in cars. They were not on planes. So something that we, sort of a little bit of an aha. Okay, makes sense. People have more time to spend with books. On the academic side, when I started to look at that, I was shocked at the ratio of circs, particularly because on the academic side, they buy so many less audiobooks overall. It's always been about reading and literature, but it's been pretty consistent that this was both pre-COVID and post-COVID. It's about for every 1.3 ebooks that circ, an audiobook circs. And the really surprising part about that is the collections. There's so much more on the ebook side. So you're looking at collections with 5 to 10 times the amount of ebooks versus audiobooks, yet they're circling at, not quite a 1-to-1 ratio, but almost.
Close.
It was just really surprising.
Now, is scholarly content available in audio formats? Or are we talking about, when you say audio titles, are we talking about the trade basically, or? It's
much more trade, but audio has changed dramatically in the last 5 years. As publishers have seen the opportunity where there's more revenue, it's a higher price point, but it's also fairly expensive to produce an audiobook. I've gone down this road with a lot of publishers, and, converting their print files over to ebook might be as little as, $100, to do a full production average 250-page novel is probably a minimum of $2,000 to $3,000. So it's a significant investment. You have to sell a certain amount of units. But with that, those prices have come down from what they were from a number of years ago for publishers. It's far more profitable. I think OverDrive, and I'm pulling this number off the top of my head, but I want to say we have about 350 to 400,000 audiobooks in total. It's a really robust collection, but we can never get enough. Of audio. And you see like the big New York publishers now produce all their own, where 10 years ago, that was being done by Blackstone or people who are dedicated just strictly to the audio format.
Yeah.
And it's something that is changing. I don't want to go too far afield here from your question. And I've talked to a few of these companies that they're using AI, text-to-speech technology, and sort of machine learning. And it's a pretty adequate recording. But I think it is really going to change dramatically. I don't know. It's not going to be today or tomorrow, but I think certainly in the next 3 to 4 years, it's going to be possible for academic publishers to produce titles for a few $100s, where these big tomes would have probably been, a $10,000 thing. And how many are they going to sell those to make money? But it just becomes another opportunity. And I do think, sorry, I'm probably going a little farther afield here, but, as people assign their phones more tasks, from your alarm clock to your calendar to, recording your body mass index and everything else that we could assign our phones. I'm a huge audiobook fan, and I think students having the ability to utilize their phone, like as they walk across campus, they can listen to a book, getting ready for a test. They know it's very predictable. Like if they have to read a Dostoevsky book and it's, a bear of a read, like, oh my God, how long is that going to take me? They know the audiobook's like, hey, that is going to take me 6.8 hours, or Dostoevsky's probably 12 or 15.
Right. Well, they could always put it on double time or something and listen to it in half the time.
I listened to the Obama book. It was a 29-hour audiobook, and I listened at 1.5, and I finished in 19 hours. And I'm very used to it.
Yeah.
My wife thinks I'm a little bit crazy, but now as she comes up against our local library with a 2-week window, she finds that I have to listen to it faster. So she's getting used to it. And I actually caught her. I'm like, hey, you're listening to this at 1:25 and you just checked out the book.
Yeah. I did the same thing. It's kind of funny. You're listening to Obama talk super fast, but you do get used to it.
I get used to it. And I got some books, it's like, come on, let's pick up the pace here. But if it's, some dense, a lot of character fiction, I'm all over the map. Everything from business books to fiction to bestseller.
Yeah. So any sense of how this engagement might continue moving forward as libraries and institutions emerge from COVID? What behavior, if any, will likely remain longer term?
That is a great question. I think you're going to continue to see interest in different formats because the way students are consuming them. And it has been really eye-opening for me, the way they get more value in their collection out of the audiobooks, that I think schools should, I would never tell a school what to buy, but just to show them how other schools their books are being consumed. And also just talking to some schools. And I was looking at one where, I don't want to name names, but it's a statewide consortia for a lot of state schools and community colleges. They have a pretty robust collection, but the number of holds on the audio side compared to the ebook side, it's 5 times as much.
Wow.
So just if you want to serve those students, and, academics different. There's required reading. I mean, institutions will buy books that they know only 3 people are going to check out, but it's part of a doctorate program. And, those books have a very specific need. They're not necessarily about the circs the way public libraries are.
Right.
It is about having the material they need to support the majors, the education.
Mm-hmm. You just heard from Stephen Rosato. He's the general manager of OverDrive Professional, the academic and corporate services division of the ebook and distribution platform. OverDrive Professional is the sponsor of this series. Join us next week when we continue our conversation and talk about how OverDrive Professional is helping to relieve some of the pain points academic libraries are experiencing in collection development and digital resource promotion, as well as how last year's acquisition of RB Digital from RB Media is signaling a new content strategy for OverDrive.
It allows us to do what we call non-traditional content, which means it's not hosted by us. So we're used to hosting an ebook, an audiobook. It's on the OverDrive server. This allows us to authenticate a server through OverDrive, then serve up the content. They go to the service provider, whether it is Learning Live, Artist Works, Indie Flicks. It just offers up a whole new world of possibility for us. So we've been very keenly focused on making sure that all those existing customers, now they get the added benefit of accessing OverDrive and our catalog and everything that OverDrive offers, but they also have the great product they already bought. and they have it the way that they were used to it, and to make sure that that continued on.
If you like what you hear, rate us or give us a review on your podcast platform of choice. As always, sponsorship and advertising for the Authority File podcast are handled by Choice's advertising manager, Pam Marino, and all of our episodes are produced by Choice's senior digital media producer, Mark Dirks, and digital media assistant, Sabrina Kofer. That's all for this week. Thanks for joining us.